So this is the lecture recording for pages 341 through 352, Movement West. Um, so the introduction here just kind of talks about how many people and why people are moving westward. The Oregon Trail is the main highway for westward movement. 300,000, 400,000, somewhere in there. People brave the Oregon Trail across the United States to go to what is present day Oregon and Washington under the concept of manifest destiny, that we can and will take what we want because God has ordained it, and we're justified in taking this land from the Native Americans and for our own use. This is Manifest Destiny, which we talked about at length in class, the painting Manifest Destiny. All right, agriculture. By the early 1800s, land scarce in the East. I mean, people are there, have been there for a long time, over 100, 200 years, and so they really need to move west. And its land is super inexpensive in the West. It's super expensive and more productive in the mid-Atlantic states than it is in New England, but it's dang near impossible to get land in the South. So there's not much choice but to go west. There's limited opportunity if you're poor, except for to move west. And moving west is scary. You're out there by yourself. We talked about this. Native Americans against you. But there's super strong incentives for moving west with cheap land, fertile land, things like that. Public land prices fall between 1800 and 1830 because we want people to move and we want people to settle. We need to get as many people out there populating what is now the United States. And you can see this big jump that we talked about in class, movement westward. Number of settlers in the old Northwest, so we're talking about Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, rose tenfold between 1810 and 1840. The old Northwest was a mosaic of different settlements with differing views. Migration belts tend to move east to west and maintain the same north-south cultural differences as existed along the Atlantic coast. And we talked about that a lot in class, how movement is east to west instead of north to south. Wheat became the major cash crop in the north and contributed to northern manufacturing. They're fed. So that's the cash crop. They're being fed. And so we can work and do anything else we want to do. Here is a great picture of Silas McCormick's Reaper. You can see here he's testing it out and showing people everything. And where this field, and you can't see off to the right, but we talked about it in class, would take weeks to do. Now with the Reaper, as I discussed, the blue thing that the horse is pulling, it would take way less time. So technology plays a big role. Skyrocketing cotton prices in the old Southwest and the defeat of Indian confederacies in Georgia made a land boom happen. 6 new states entered the Union in a 30-year period: Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, Arkansas, Florida, and Texas. The southwestern frontier attracted planters and independent farmers. Anybody who could get there and get to the land. You needed to get there and get to the land. And again, there's tons of opportunities. Lots of hard things and hardships for living in the West, but tons of things to prosper with. The Southwest Ordinance of 1790 opened all territory south of the Ohio River to slavery. We talked about that. Northwest Ordinance said no. Southwest Ordinance said yes. Here's the westward expansion. Again, you have to have, when a slave state comes in, a free state has to come in, or vice versa. So free state Indiana, Mississippi comes in. Free state Illinois, Alabama comes in. Free state Maine, slave state Missouri. Slave state Arkansas, free state Michigan. Slave state Florida, free state Iowa, so on and so forth. And then, of course, Texas in 1845, and then it takes a while, but because of the Texas Republic and everything that's kind of going on, so Texas, and then eventually Wisconsin will become a free state. And then we have the territories of what are we going to do with Minnesota, Oregon, New Mexico, and Utah. In the 1830s, the United States set aside that land west of the Mississippi for Native Americans. That is present-day Oklahoma. The Sioux were the dominant power on the northern Great Plains, and they traded in buffalo hides in the early 1800s. Well, epidemic disease helped the Sioux expand since the Sioux are moving all the time. They're nomadic. They're not going to stay in one place. So if they see somebody sick, boom, they're gone. They're out of there. They're less susceptible to disease than the sedentary and agricultural people. The Western fur trade originated between the British Hudson Bay Company and the American Rocky Mountain Fur Company. They employ men known as mountain men, and they trapped fur for their companies, mostly beaver. We talked about beaver and how they're trapped in class. They lived in brutal, harsh conditions, and mortality rate among trappers ran as high as 80% a year. You can make a lot of money, but you also have a high chance of dying. You have an 80% chance of dying every year. Is much higher than the rest of the population. Once a year, twice a year, depending, but mostly once a year, the rendezvous system brought trappers together and Native Americans, traders, annual fair for them to bring in their various goods. And by the 1830s, the fur trade decimated animal populations, and disease decimated and ravaged Native American tribes. They first start with beaver, and then we go buffalo pelts, and we dang near kill the buffalo. And that was what the Native Americans used to survive. Between 1840 and 1850, 150,000 Americans made the overland trip from Missouri, Independence, Missouri, to Oregon, Utah, and California. And you have a choice. You can go either way. Under an 1818 agreement, Oregon Territory is administered jointly by the United States and Great Britain. We'll worry about it when we need to worry about it. And then they will figure out how we're going to settle the Oregon Territory when we get there. Overland trip sucked. Okay. The wagon, which was pulled by oxen, was not comfortable to ride in. You always had somebody sitting in the seat, but for the most part, everybody's usually walking right alongside the wagon. There's Native American attacks. There's natural disasters. There's animals, snakes. There's a big thing, and you would just go days upon days until you got to the next fort or the next settlement where you knew you'd be safe. You were on edge all the time. We do try to sign a treaty called the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1851 with the Plains Indians, and this is the first time we're going to try to draw boundaries to contain the Plains Indians. We'll get to that in just a minute. Here's the map of the Oregon Trail, which talked about the Santa Fe Trail if you didn't want to cross the Rocky Mountains. The Mormon Trail, the California Trail, all those things, and then the different forts that were there. The different number of travelers, total travelers, people, whether they chose to go to Oregon or California. Oregon is ideal for a long period of time, and then, of course, in 1849, gold's found in California, so everybody goes to California for the gold. We see spikes in this issue. You see that in 1852. That's when the Mormons are really moving in high numbers to Utah. And that's where we stop with Mexican borderlands.